Testing, testing, yay! We're alive. Alive, he says. So you all had the chance to go and actually ask the architects about what's happening with Java. But no, you didn't want to learn, did you? You wanted to come to the fun session. Good afternoon, everybody. I know you've all had a big lunch, and a lot of you are probably quite sleepy. I can see some people sleeping in the back. I will try not to speak too loudly for you, because we're a caring community here at DevOps. My name is Martijn Verburg. Some of you will remember me from many, many years ago. So, let's get started. This is what I do today, a little bit. So I help run Adopt OpenJDK. We are the number 2 OpenJDK provider in the world, according to a very reliable source, us. I used to be the CEO of JClarity. Then something happened. We got acquired. Yes. Microsoft and Java's back, baby. You're going to love it. There's Duke riding the Microsoft dinosaur. It's beautiful, isn't it? Needless to say, this talk was accepted before I got acquired by Microsoft, and this talk is somewhat career limiting. So apparently this is being live streamed, so hello, boss. This is going to be a bad, bad day for me. Anyway, if you want to find me, us, everybody on Twitter, Adopt OpenJDK is who you want to follow if you want to get your free Java, as in free as in bear and free as in use. Java at Microsoft. It's a new Twitter handle. If you want to find out what Microsoft is doing with Java, then do follow that account. And I seriously mean get your phones out now and follow that account, because I have a quota to fill. We have to get to 2,000 followers by the end of today, please. And if we do, I get this. So remember this, Java at Microsoft. And I'm going to check at the end of this talk. And if I'm not at 2,000, I'll be a very, very annoyed developer. So, as I said before, you're probably quite tired. You've had a long lunch. Don't worry. You're safe with me. But here's a kitten to make you feel better. Are we all feeling better now? That's good. So we're going to have some rules for this talk. Got to have rules, codes of conduct, that sort of thing. I had to insert this slide this morning. Hi, boss. So to be very, very clear, this talk is not a Microsoft talk. This is me as a completely independent person. So if anyone's under the age of 16, get out. I don't want to get in trouble. Do I have any agile coaches in the room? Come on, own up. Put your hand up. Who here's earning 1,000 euros a day as an agile coach? Don't be shy. They keep quiet now, don't they? 8 years ago they didn't. They were quite proud. No more. Software craftsmanship. 8 years ago, half the room put their hands up very proudly. How many people are now software craftspeople today? Hands up. Oh, I have successfully killed that movement. Yes! So if you're a software craftsman person, this talk might offend you somewhat. So headphones perhaps, maybe do some work or leave. Up to you. If you're a rockstar ninja programmer, you can also leave. There's no room for you here. And if you're a cloud native developer, who here's cloud native? Woo! Come on. Cloud native. Yeah, rock on. You do all the cool stuff now, right? Have you got any idea where your code is running in the world? You don't, do you? You don't know where it is. You just get the bill, don't you, from a cloud provider. It's lovely. It's an improvement over the old days, though, isn't it? Serverless. Any serverless developers here? Magically running their code on vapor, thin air, and maybe some water? There's no data centers behind that serverless thing, is there? What a stupid term. And do we have any Node.js developers in the room? Last time I was here, I got them escorted out by security. This year, they're not admitting they're in the room, so that's good. They've learnt their lesson. Nice, excellent. This is what's happened to us in the industry. Winter has come. It used to be, when I first started, I used to be able to sit down in front of my IBM keyboard, remember one of those mechanical ones, clackety, 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 clack, with my big CRT monitor, and I had the entire code base on a floppy disk, or in my head, and I could compile it, run it, test it, deploy it, all from my workstation. And I'd take that compiled binary on my floppy disk, and I'd walk around the room and start installing it on people's computers. It's called continuous deployment. So we're chained today. We're chained today by the horrible, evil, modern practices, and cloud native is just the latest swath of this nonsense that's come out. So, having been at Microsoft now for 3 months, I sort of kind of started rooting around Microsoft, wondering, Microsoft really supports developers. How are they going to help the world break free of these chains of serverless and microservices, and everybody has to learn Kubernetes? Ooh. Then I found this guy, my personal hero from 8 years ago. So we're going to have a little bit of fun here. I would like everybody to stand up, please. Everybody stand up. Go on. I know you've had a big lunch. Everybody stand up. You're going to love this. I told you Steve Ballmer was going to come in the room, didn't I? After me. Developers, 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 developers. And my stock price just went up. Thank you very much. You can all sit down again. I love it. Steve Ballmer was a love-hate figure for the world, but he did have one thing right, and that was his ethos about that Microsoft cared about developers. Developers are the new king and queen makers, and we should make sure that the developers have got the tools and the techniques and everything they need in place to make the world better, and not constrict them and chain them with all of these evil practices. So let's talk about modern software development. Here's an interesting statistic. Ooh, a bit damning, isn't it? Would you like to see this in the bridge building industry? 68% of all bridges built failed. Whoops. What about airplanes? Who would like to fly in the airplane industry without a failure rate like this? It's terrible, isn't it? It's terrible. So we end up building things like this. Or this. This is NoSQL. Quite like that one. And Java's not immune. Can anybody guess what 0.2 and 3.0 in Java adds up to? It's a programming language that should get math kind of right? Yep. Leaves you wondering, doesn't it? I mean, I don't even know what's going on anymore. The world has just gone mad. So let's talk about best practices. Let's not. Let's talk about better practices. So whenever you have one of these agile coaches or Scrum consultants or software craftspeople who are charging you €1,000 a day, talking about best practices of the week, show them the door and they can leave. It's all about better practices. Just follow what's best for you and your team. Let's talk about agile. Agile is not a silver bullet. It is a pyramid scheme. Now, I love this. Demonstrated significant understanding of how to organize and manage several Scrum teams using the scaled professional Scrum. What does that even mean? I have no idea, but it sells a lot of certificates. Who here has one of those certificates up there? No one's going to admit to it? Oh, it's 3 people up there. I'll find you afterwards. You can tell me how many tens of thousands of euros they made you pay for that course. It's fascinating. Agile is simply about this. Everybody seems to forget this. I bet you if you go back to your teams tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow when DevOps is finished, sorry, that would be a Saturday, that's Microsoft hours, don't worry about it, Monday, ask your team who can actually tell you what the Agile Manifesto is. Bet you it'll be less than 10%. I would take this and put it up in the wall around your office or your home office or in your team pod or whatever they call it in Hipsterville these days. Stick it over there and make sure that people read that and ignore everything else. Everything else is just a fad. This is what it was really about. Covered that. Software craftsmanship. This guy is awesome. If you can dress like this gentleman, then you can call yourself a software craftsperson, and I actually won't care. I think that's just awesome, because he's rocking it. Wicked. Software craftsmanship is simply about an attitude. So again, if you've got people coming to you trying to sell you books, training courses, etc., 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 again, it's a smaller pyramid scheme than Scrum, but it's still a pyramid scheme. So make sure that it's just about the attitude. And the attitude really is that you just care about what you're doing. You care about the fact that you are building something which is going to run something important for another human being. You're building the equivalent of a bridge or an aeroplane in a lot of industries. And would you build a bridge that would fall down? Would you build an aeroplane that would crash because you forgot to write that unit test? You probably wouldn't, would you? I certainly hope not. So don't be the honey badger. The honey badger doesn't care. Do care. Do be the software craftsman. So, some practical tips. Be awesome. And what do I mean by being awesome? Defend your empire. Who here has an architect in their team or architects in their organization? Everybody, great. Who here is a software architect? Ooh, I'm going to have fun here. How many, for the software architects only, how many of you are building monoliths? You all got caught by the fad, didn't you? How many of you building microservices? Go on, admit it. Every single darn one of you. Microservices, microservices, microservices. Out of all the developers in the room, hands up if you are using microservices today. Keep your hand up if you're enjoying it. Yeah, I thought so. Less than half. Enforced upon you by the architects. So defend your empire, developers. Don't let those architects take your monolith away from you. Defend it with your cold, dead body if you have to. Part of being really awesome at your job is about code reviews. And remember, the more senior you are, the more you're just allowed to tell people what to do. And don't worry about doing it yourself. Very important. You want to make sure that the source code you write is really easy to read, well documented and well commented. Here is a shining example of some, I'm going to guess the language here, it's not Clojure. It looks a little bit like C, doesn't it? But it's beautiful, it does actually run, believe it or not. And that person's got a job for life, haven't they? Especially if you take away the formatter. It's great. Remember that knowledge is power. So you must make sure you do things like build your own framework. Don't worry about using Spring or Jakarta EE or Vertex. Don't worry about using some of the core libraries in Java. Write your own. Who here has their own collections library? Is it just me? Can't just be me. Got to write your own collections library, your own util library. Who here's got a util class? Yes, that's much better. That's job. That helps you keep your job. That's fantastic. Do not read books. Do not read blog posts, white papers, that sort of thing. Right? You don't want to be dependent or learn from others. Someone keeps trying to call me in the middle of my talk. It's my boss. It's telling me to stop. Oh dear. And don't listen to the so-called industry giants or industry leaders. The challenge with people like this guy is that those who cannot code teach. And those who cannot teach write books. And those who can't write books become conference speakers. And then you go and listen to us, don't you? Bad, bad, bad idea. Make sure you code in isolation. Here is a fantastically accurate portrayal by Hollywood of the typical Java developer. Notice the threatening hoodie and bits of random cable hanging from the ceiling, which is very important. In case he needs to plug in his brain or something. Definitely do not talk to any users, because what do users do? They change their requirements, don't they? Every single time. So don't talk to users. That way you'll have 100% satisfaction with your software. Whew, I've got 35 minutes left, and I'm already 55 slides through. Fun. This is a very important technique, resume-driven development. Who here has picked up Kotlin recently? That's good on the CV, isn't it? What about Clojure? Who here is still doing some Clojure? Fantastic. See, this person here has been watching the job industry carefully. Did you know that Clojure engineers are the most highly paid software engineers on the planet today? Apart from Fortran. So either go old school to Fortran or pull out that university Lisp book and go for Clojure. You'll be forced to do financial services, which is a bit dull, but when you're driving away in that sweet, sweet Porsche, you won't care. This is another way to become exceptional at your craft. So now that I'm hiring a lot of new graduates and things into Microsoft, they're expecting during the interview that we're going to grill them on computer science questions. That we're going to ask them how many golf balls can you fit inside a Boeing 747 and why are manhole covers round? These sorts of exciting questions. The reality is I now just put them through a 1 hour long boot camp of how well they can copy and paste from Stack Overflow. And the ones who actually can dive in through the questions, follow the links, read the comments, where they realize that even though the most upvoted answer is just horribly wrong, means they can weave their way through Stack Overflow and find the true answer. It's great. You've also got to make sure that you're using the right tools. So your IDE is very important. How many people here use Eclipse? Not many anymore. NetBeans? Yep, the 3 NetBeans committers have put their hands up. Fantastic. IntelliJ's IDE? Yes. Keep your hands up if you pay for it, or if your boss does. Ooh, see, JetBrains loves you. They're all wrong, by the way, because the only editor you actually need is Vi. As you can see here, now that I work for Microsoft, I managed to find an old Windows NT box. Booted it up, brought up Vi, and I love the documentation at the top of this. If you don't know how to use Vi at all, you should not read this help. Which I think is utterly brilliant. Vi is for the elite, so it's it's another great interview test. Just get someone to write "Hello World" in Java in Vi. It's hysterical to watch. You even get the Java architects to do it. It's great. It's fun to watch. So if you manage to follow all of those techniques that I showed you, so make sure you use Vi, copy and paste from Stack Overflow, make sure you choose languages like Clojure or Fortran to further your career. Don't talk to users. Make sure that you get arrested by the police while you're hacking. If you do all those things, you get this. Mortgage-driven development. That's the end result. Now, a lot of people might say, oh, you poor person, you had to do Fortran your whole life. You don't care. Look at you. You're retired by 42 in the Bahamas. It's lovely there. Fantastic. So let's get on to the really fun topics. Let's talk about the future. And the future is here now, isn't it? It's cloud native. We love cloud native, don't we? Everything's in the cloud. The cloud is a trap. It is one of the biggest traps out there. And just to remind you of this, I'm not speaking on behalf of my employer. We may or may not be, depending on which way you look at it, the second or first largest cloud company in the world. But at least we recognize that multi-cloud is probably going to need to be a thing, which I think is good. Because a lot of clouds, especially when they first started, they're the new walled garden. I mean, how many of you here are on, I'm just going to pick on any cloud. How many of you here are on, say, I'm going to call it out. They're the number one, right? Amazon. Who here is on AWS? Can you even fathom of how you would get your data out of AWS? Right? You should actually ask your bosses and ask your system administrators and your DBAs, what if we decided to switch cloud vendor? How easily could we get that data out? You'll see them running, screaming, probably lighting themselves on fire because it would be easier than to actually escape. Just as a daily reminder, just because it's a cloud, and I believe the gentleman who was speaking here before me pointed this out as well, cloud backed by actual real hardware running in real data centers, destroying our planet. So remember that whenever you're writing a piece of code which is inefficient. You're adding to the global warming problem. Do we all feel better about our industry now? It's all right, I took the Eurostar over here, so I'm feeling quite smug. Didn't fly. Of course, you have a difficult choice now, because you've got to choose which kind of cloud to go for, and these are difficult decisions, right? So I've got a little bit of a guide for you on which cloud you should pick. There we go. My marketing people would be so proud. I'm pretty sure that was not authorized in any way, shape, or form. It was the official logo, though, so at least I got that part right. Let's talk about cloud native. Let's have an empty slide, because I didn't check my slide deck well enough. Let's talk about DevOps. Who here has been asked now, in the last 2 or 3 years, to not only be a Java engineer or a Scala engineer, but to be a full-stack developer? Oh, you've all been asked to be full-stack developers. How many of you feel you are mastering being a full-stack developer? Anybody brave enough to put their hand up? Nobody. It is utterly ridiculous. Not only today do you have to be an expert in Java, you have to be an expert in the JVM garbage collection, all the efficiency, how that's all running, Docker, Kubernetes. You probably need to know some shell scripting these days. You need to know how to use the entirety of the command line of whichever cloud vendor you're with. Package managers. You've got to build a front end, don't you? So you need to learn some React as well. Am I missing anything? Networking. You have to learn about networking and ports and firewalls. And it's microservices now, isn't it? Yeah, microservices. That simplified things. Service meshes. Yeah, health checks, circuit breakers. It's making life very hard. So this is the state of DevOps today, as far as I understand it, because the idea was that it was meant to be a cultural change. We were supposed to close the divide between most of us here who are developers, and we used to, write a big Microsoft Word document, hand it over to the system administrators or the operators, along with a big jar file, usually on a USB stick. And then 3 weeks later, it would be deployed to production, or a system administrator would come back to you and say, instruction 419 on page 28 was wrong. You're useless, Mr. Developer or Ms. Developer. So it's meant to be a cultural shift where developers in particular are supposed to be able to be in charge of or have infrastructure as code and make things like deployments testable, repeatable, all these good things. What's really actually has happened is that some of the people who we used to call system administrators got a job title change. They're now called DevOps engineers. And some of the developers who actually were vaguely competent on the Linux command line are now also have a job title change, and they're also called DevOps engineers. Who here is a DevOps engineer? What's my next question I'm going to ask those DevOps engineers? Let me think here. Okay, out of all the DevOps engineers, who here uses Terraform? Puppet? Chef? Ansible? It just goes on and on. And notice there for those who are watching that every single DevOps engineer or small group of engineers all chose a different tool set. So there's no consistency here. It's just absolutely horrific. There's so much choice, so many tools, so many ways of doing things that it's actually impossible for you as a day-to-day developer to keep up. So when I got asked to become a full-stack engineer, this was pretty much me after about day one. It's just horrible. I like the idea of things like Terraform, because look, you get to do it in Vi, if you really want to, which of course is the best editor out there. And so it looks like you're doing some real code, and it looks fairly simple in things. The trick is you can't really test it. Not truly. You kind of got to, actually execute the deployment to see what happens, right? You just end up getting this. This is what happened to me when I tried to use Terraform the other day. Something went in it wrong. I mean, they couldn't even spell the error message right. And not only that, how useless is that error message? Something went wrong, no kidding. Thanks very much. I almost threw my monitor out the window at that point. So I don't think DevOps is helping us at all. And this is a little salient lesson for all of you who do write error messages in your software. Please don't do this. Please don't write something went wrong. Stack trace would be nice. Maybe a bit of English which was actually spelt correctly wouldn't go amiss. Give it a go. So this is where I see the state of DevOps today. I'm hoping it will get better, but what I'm really seeing happening out there now is that people are basically just building DevOps teams which used to be system administration and DBA teams. And I think that's actually okay. It's okay to have specialists who actually really truly understand the 58 different command line tools you need to deploy an application today. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit when I go into the containers section. So we all like containers. Continuous delivery. So if you remember the 4 sort of pieces of being cloud native is continuous delivery, containers, microservices, and DevOps. So we'll talk about continuous delivery. Everyone probably remembers this cartoon from many years ago. So now it takes so ridiculously long to get a change through to anywhere because, let me see, you've got to compile the code locally, send it up to some pipeline somewhere in the cloud. That pipeline then goes and fires off agents everywhere and starts building your code. Starts going through the test pipeline, then the performance pipeline, then who here is using Sneak? Sneak or Snick, however you pronounce it. Few people. Then that bot pops up and says, oh no, you've got a security violation in your 18th transitive package. Go back to Maven Central and do something new. Right? Your pull request gets rejected again. Oh, and then there's a merge conflict. Oh, gosh, Bob got on there faster before me again. Have to go start that again. Then I've got to figure out, is it squash and rebase? Is it squash merge? Merge? Is it fast forward merge? Who here just uses squash merge because it looks like the safest thing to do? Ooh, only 3 of you. Who actually uses the true merge in Git? No? What do the rest of you actually do? I'm sensing a lot of hand merging going on here. My personal favorite is the -F option with Git. Just force. Every single time. I swear by it, and it works. It infuriates the other 150 engineers that adopt OpenJDK. But that's why I'm the director. See, tough luck. Of course, source control is very important. So you really want to make sure that you've got a source control repository, which is stable, secure, and always up and running. Again, please note, this is not the opinion of my employer. GitHub is a wonderful subsidiary, and it's doing amazing things for the world, quite seriously. But unfortunately, if you're not storing your source code on your own local file system and relying on a third-party cloud, sometimes you don't get access to your source code. And so you go back to this again, which is cool. What else do we have here? Yes. Continuous deployment and continuous integration. No more conflicts, right? No more merge conflicts. We don't see those anymore, do we? Who here has resolved a merge conflict this week? What about 2? 3? Can I go 4? 5? You poor, poor person. I hope you get a holiday next week. 5 merge conflicts in a week. That's all right, it's better because we're continuously integrating, aren't we? And then, of course, if you use Jenkins, you just get this. Or, if you're finally doing it right, you get this. And this is the nirvana, isn't it? Lovely. Who here's got a lovely big monitor above their team space somewhere? It's fantastic, isn't it? How often is it all green? Never. Never, ever, ever is it all green, is it? It's always these colors. And what do? You're typing away, you look up, and your team lead typically goes, we'll talk about this in the retrospective. And in the retrospective you go, we need to do better with our CI system. We need to get really on top of that. We'll have a sprint to tidy up all of the build statuses. And you do. You spend the next 3 days fixing all of those highs and bugs, fixing all the port issues. And then 2 weeks later, you're back at this again. Just a waste of time, isn't it? That may or may not be the Adopt OpenJDK build farm. I couldn't possibly comment. The next thing we're going to talk about with cloud native, is about microservices. Microservices are fantastic, aren't they? All the architects in the room agree, and they're more highly paid than new developers, so they must be right. Microservices today. Isn't that good? So, I have no idea what's going on here. And it's impossible to track. Those big pink dots look interesting, though. They look important. And I wouldn't want to be the developer responsible for the purple code in the middle, because that doesn't really look very microservice-y to me in the middle there, does it? It looks a bit centralized, which is what always ends up happening with microservices, doesn't it? Who here does naughty things like share the same data store across 2 microservices? Who does that? Yeah, it's a dirty secret, isn't it? Dirty secret. Who cares about that isolation? Just the database is the event bus. Come on. Again, I go back to this very important point. If someone tries to take your monolith away from you, the monolith which has been working perfectly well for 15 years, delivering business value, paying your salary, don't let the architects take it away, please. Just keep it. Refactor it if you have to. Turn it into fat services if you have to. But whatever you do, do not turn it into microservices. Now, the architects out there will say, Martijn, you are wrong. Because we recognize that this is, come on phone, we recognize this could be a little bit complicated for the average human being to keep in their head. We recognize this. So don't be worried, because we have one of these. The service mesh will rescue you. It will provide you a really simplistic map and way to manage all of your microservices. So here's another new thing you can pay for in the cloud vendor, and you'll get a map like this, which is a lovely map of, by the way, for those of you who haven't been to the Tokyo subway, absolutely fantastic city, highly recommend it. The map is about as easy to read as Twitter's deployment model. And then, of course, okay, so maybe the service mesh thing isn't helping so much, but auto-scaling will help. So now you know when, Black Friday happens, Christmas Eve, the day before school when all the parents forget to buy their children's school uniform. Hi, son. Sorry again. Auto-scaling will help you out. And you'll horizontally scale, or you'll even vertically scale if you're lucky. Because it's all being done by good things like Kubernetes and Docker and stuff, right? This is what auto-scaling actually just does. It just increases your bill. There you go, 1 day of usage from auto-scaling. Ouch. And that was my Hello World service. Because I was foolish enough to give a talk at a conference, and I said, hey, I've done this new microservices thing. I'd just like everyone to get out their phones and just hit the service, which I'd completely under-provisioned, because I'd used an Amazon micro instance. And before I knew it, bill. And yeah. That was back in 2014. I'm still arguing with them today over it. Let's talk about containers. Containers are fun, aren't they? Because what we really needed to solve all of our software problems was to add yet another layer of abstraction, because that's good computer science, isn't it? So now we are writing Java code, which gets compiled into Java bytecode, which, if you're lucky, gets hotspotted into machine code, which then gets run on an operating system-ish. Well, let's call it run in a C group in a container, which is then running in a Kubernetes pod, which is then running on a virtual machine somewhere, which is then running on an operating system, which is then actually running on a piece of hardware. And we used to have customers in JClarity going, we've moved to the cloud, we've moved to virtualization, and everything just seems a little bit slower. But we've talked to some architects, we've talked to some consulting architect companies, and they tell us that if we just keep on with the Kubernetes and Docker and container movement, it'll all just get better. And we shake our heads, and I give them the story, and they still choose Docker and containers. So here's an accurate picture of how simple containers are. So this is a typical Docker deployment. Notice fun things here, like all the new technologies you have to learn. You have to Ansible up the thing in the first place, and that can create you, an image, which you can then turn into a Docker image, which you then need to kind of layer on top of each other, because you can't just have one Docker image. No, you've got to have a whole bunch of Docker images all stacked up on top of each other. And if there's a security bug in the bottommost one, then you've got to get your crane out, which is, I don't even know what that tool's called, something. And they'll pick up all the stacks, and you go and fix the bottom image, and you redeploy the whole lot, and it's just a horrendous mess. So I decided last night to try again. Like, Docker can't be that bad. I mean, how many commands does it have? Right? Manage, build, manage. And note that most of these commands have got a whole swath of subcommands as well. And this is just one page. There's a second page of commands for Docker. Like, look at all that. That's amazing. Those Docker engineers must be having a wonderful time. What I can't wait for is, see how they're collecting the alphabet here? They've got A, B, C, D, E. They've missed F, H, I. They haven't got J yet, K, L, M. Z or Z is going to be the hard one. I'm not quite sure what they're going to call that command. Maybe snooze or something. Docker snooze. That'd be great, wouldn't it? And then the end result is just this. Failed start Docker application container engine. And again, look at this. Status 1, failure, exited. Why? Nobody knows. I'll look a little bit further down. What does that say? Unit entered failed state. Yeah, I know that. Thanks very much. So I gave up on Docker. I called up some of the internal container and cloud experts at Microsoft, and I said, what do I do? And they said, well, the answer is Kubernetes. Right? You don't need to use Docker anymore. You can just use Kubernetes and our pre-built Docker images we have, so you don't have to create your own anymore, manage your own. That's all done for you. You just put it in Kubernetes. Then they told me a fun fact. Kubernetes means Klingon for fuck you. It's great. I didn't know that fact. The Klingon language is beautiful, and I'm really impressed that the Kubernetes developers managed to find that word. So I thought Kubernetes must be simpler. It won't have as many commands as Docker, surely. I was wrong. And I like this. Basic commands. See how there's only 4 of them? It really just says it all, doesn't it? And the advanced commands, however, and troubleshooting or debugging commands kind of says everything, doesn't it? And of course, it wasn't just 1, but 2 pages of these commands. And kubectl, how are you supposed to pronounce it? Does anybody know? Kubectl, cubicle. It's very confusing trying to talk to people about that command line tool. So I tried Kubernetes, and notice again, I got to pull out my Windows laptop because I work for Microsoft now, which is really cool. And I can use this thing called PowerShell, which was awesome, because the slashes go the other way, which is always fun. because I like a challenge. Not just Kubernetes, a whole new shell. It's great. And I got things like this. Unable to connect a server. No connection could be made because the target machine actively refused it. That target machine knows better. That target machine hasn't drunk the Kool-Aid. The target machine's gone, you want to do what? Use Kubernetes on me? Piss off. Not having it. Had enough. So I tried a few more times, but got stuck again. So unfortunately, Docker failure, Kubernetes failure. Then I tried one last time. I used like kind of the latest beta version of Docker and Kubernetes on Windows, and that did make me more than a little bit sad. It is, to be fair to Microsoft, this is a much nicer blue screen of death than it used to be. And I just wish they'd updated the error message. It should have been, you were stupid enough to run Kubernetes on this PC, and we are shutting down because of it. That is what should happen. What else can I say about Kubernetes? So then I talked to some more DevOps engineers inside Microsoft and other places who assured me that it was just me being stupid and wrong, which is probably a fair comment. And that, again, the whole ecosystem of Kubernetes has gotten much better and there's nothing to worry about. Because they have this thing called Helm to help you manage your Kubernetes. And I just loved this. A package manager for Kubernetes. So now not only do we have a package manager for our operating system and a package manager for our Java applications, Maven fans, Gradle fans, people who are both Maven and Gradle fans, yay! All one happy family. So now you've got 3 package managers you need to deeply understand in order to deploy one of your applications. You've got to get your operating system right, you've got to get your container right, you've got to get Java right. And then I decided to start a new open source project. So you can come join me at packet.io. I'm going to get the domain name after this talk. We're going to create the ultimate package manager for package managers, and that will just be the end of it. And it's just going to have one basic command, deploy everything, and it will do the operating system, Kubernetes, Java, Node, the whole lot. It's going to be beautiful. I just need about 150 volunteers full-time for a year. But it'll be great for your CV. It's good exposure. You'll like it. So, after all of this, my conclusion is this. People used to write software that did that. They stuck a big bomb on the bottom of a little tiny cockpit and made it go into outer space. All using Fortran or Ada or COBOL, or sometimes even a little bit of C. They didn't have the agile software movement. They didn't have software craftsmanship. They didn't have modern source control. They sure as heck did not work in open plan offices. They didn't have cloud, containers, Kubernetes, Docker, Istio, health checks, circuit breakers, JUnit, Maven. They did have Vi, I will note. So you have to think for yourself when you are engaging in your software application building, and especially when you are teaching the next generation. Please, please, please do teach them the fundamentals of the why of why these things exist or why these tools were created. What problem were they trying to solve? And then show them how the crazy tool makers actually have made it worse. And impart that lesson for the rest of their days. So it makes you think, do we need all of this? Do you automatically need to reach for the microservices tool belt? Do you automatically have to say, oh, we have a service which adds 2 numbers and returns it, therefore we probably need to bootstrap it in Kubernetes to scale that? The answer is no, you don't. Just in case you're wondering. Build for what you need. Most of the time, you probably still just need to build a monolith. All right? That's all you need. You're not Twitter, you're not Google, you're not Netflix, most of you. All of these tools, all this microservices, all this stuff was actually built for them and their environments. Sure, it makes sense for Twitter. Sure, it makes sense for, let's say, LinkedIn. Doesn't necessarily make sense for you, your small team, and the payroll app that you're building for your insurance company. So once you've managed to apply that thinking, you can chill out, relax. You've got your rubber ducky to talk to. You got your Dr. Dre Beats headphones, which shows you're cool. Because people were saying that the Java audience were a bit aging and a bit, we're not fun anymore, etc. We're going to prove them wrong. I did make one little mistake on this image, so I'm just going to correct that for you. So that's a little bit better. And you'll just be a much happier person for it. Oops. So thank you very much for listening. Appreciate you listening to my rant. Remember, I need to get to 2,000 followers, please, so I get my cool Xbox that you saw at the start. Thank you for your time. I hope that despite it being somewhat of a parody talk, it actually has raised some questions in your head. Try to be kind to your architect and don't just kill them out of hand as they leave this room. And I will see you all afterwards. If you have any questions, you can... we actually have 5 minutes left. Let's try for questions. Who here would like to ask some questions about cloud-native development and get some really professional answers? Nobody's going to be brave enough? No, I can't see anyone. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon and the rest of the conference.